Have you ever wondered how different macro photography options, being various dedicated macro lenses, extension tubes, close-up filters, reverse mounts, etc. compare? Well, I did. My name is Wolf Amri, wolf.amri on Instagram. Today I will compare macro photography options from $8 to $1,000, and the results might be pretty surprising for some. People who know my photography channel or follow me on Instagram know that I long planned this macro comparison. I even started once, but then I got a bit frustrated because I didn't find a subject that was interesting and or enduring enough to take hundreds of shots. Lately I found a spider in our garden that looked like an alien. Full of excitement, I ran to get my camera, knowing that usually when I get back, the insects that I want to photograph are long gone. But the spider still sat there in a flower, so I shot and shot and shot and it didn't even move. Well, I thought you might be the perfect subject for my macro comparison. So I prepared all my macro tools and brought the spider into our house. Don't worry, to give you an idea of the size, the head of the spider is roughly 3 millimeters, which is 0.11811 inch. I calculated it by holding an SD card beside the spider and then measured the card. And then I started shooting. I didn't use the cameras that I usually use, but rather a Canon T7i, which is the 800D in Europe. Reason being is that most of my subscribers are shooting with the crop sensor camera. For those who are not, at the end I will also show you an image that I shot with my Sony A7R II. And I started with the kit lens because I wanted to give you all a comparison how each of those macro photography options will compare to the gear you may already have. So, first shot, Canon 18 to 55mm kit lens, bare bone. Just getting as close as possible with this camera lens combination. To explain, I put the camera on an Easy Macro focusing rail, set each of the lenses I tested to the closest possible focusing distance, turned on live view and zoomed in on the spider. Then I cranked and cranked and cranked and cranked until the spider's eyes were in focus. Being as close as the camera will focus, this is the maximum magnification you will be able to get. So this was the result with the kit lens maximum magnification. Let's say boring at best. Let me use the ruler tool in Photoshop to measure the distance between his outer eyes. I zoom in and read the distance. 116 pixels. What you see here is that the eyes aren't all that sharp. I need to say, being used to my own camera, it is a lot more difficult to focus with the T7i and the kit lens. I know many of you say it's about the photographer, not about the equipment, but being indoors in not all that great lighting, the flash fires only once you press the shutter, so you have to live with ambient light, makes focusing much more difficult because in live view the camera will crank up the ISO and everything looks kind of blurry. So eyeballing the focus can get really tough. Hats off to everyone who is working with not all that high-end equipment. Professionals really should appreciate that more. Okay, so much for the barebone kit lens. Next I added a Raynox DCR-250 super macro conversion lens. This is a dedicated macro tool that clips onto the front of your lens. Beside the fact that this is much more convenient than cheap screw-on filters, this lens has pretty thick corrected glass and creates a much better image quality. But that comes with a price, roughly $70 on Amazon. Worth the price? Let's see. By the way, if you like these videos and feel like you want to help me create new ones, use the referral links to all these tools in the description. Otherwise, I'd have to one day give in to platforms who regularly ask me to put them on their paid services. Back to our image. Kit lens with a Raynox macro conversion lens. Again, I missed focus. I swear it will become better now. Let's measure the eye distance. 208 pixels, so that's roughly 1.8 by more magnification. We will discuss the quality of the Raynox in a later image when we get even bigger magnification. And it's kind of useless to discuss quality in an out of focus image. Next I removed the Raynox, remember it's a clip-on so that was easy, and added a bunch of cheap extension tubes. I got the plastic ones because if you don't use them 1,000 times, the plastic will be just as good as the metal. The only thing I'd recommend is getting one that will let you set the aperture. Only the ones with contacts would let you do that. Not having that option can be a pain, as we'll discuss in a few minutes. I got the extension tube set with 3 tubes. I'd strongly recommend that. The longer the tube, the bigger the magnification. You can even calculate the magnification the extension adds. Let me know in the comments if you need help in this regard. And here is the image. One downside of the tubes is that you lose quite a bit of light. That has to do with effective apertures and effective focal lengths. Since I don't think you're here to get a math lesson, I'm not going to bore you with those magnifications. I'll post the info in the description in case you're interested. Okay, so we need more light. I increased the flash power and here we go. Finally, also a rather sharp image. The focus is on the left eye, it would be better to have it on the right eye, but what you see is that with macro, the depth of field is very shallow. I'll show you how to improve that in this video, so stay tuned. Distance between the eyes, 590 pixels. That's pretty massive compared to the Raynox and even more compared to the bare-bone kit lens. Now, the extreme enthusiastic viewers will probably think, at the Raynox. Well, have a look at this. This is how close I was already. So, nope, that didn't work. But we will save that fun for later, I swear. What we can see in this image already, lighting a subject when you're that close isn't all that easy. In my next video, I will show you an awesome diffuser for speed lights. For this test, however, I used my studio lighting. Before we continue with the kit lens using the cheapest macro option, the reverse mount, let's just quickly change lenses and use a dedicated Canon 100mm f2.8 macro lens. When I say dedicated macro lens, don't fall for the add-on macro and some zoom lenses. Per definition, macro starts at a magnification of 1:1. So if you photograph a subject that is 30mm in real life, a macro lens will project it onto your sensor with exactly that size, 30mm. So make sure to check the maximum magnification before you buy a lens. Most of the zoom macros will only magnify 1:2, meaning half the real life size of the sensor. Quite a difference. Here is the result of the real macro lens. Distance between the eyes, 316 pixels. Quite a bit less than the kit lens with extension tubes. That might be the first surprise for some. From now on, we will set this as a new reference. 316 pixels eye difference is 1:1 magnification. And remember, 1:1 is the maximum magnification that most standard real macro lenses give you. If you're now wondering what the magnification was on the combinations we already tested, I'll give you a complete overview comparing all the macro options at the end of the video. Anyway, let's add the Raynox 250 to the macro lens. 671 pixels eye distance. Pretty cool. That's a magnification of 2.1:1, so more than 2 times life size. You may notice that the Raynox is getting more effective the longer the focal length. How does that compare to the extension tubes? I added the extension tubes to the macro lens. Eye distance 614 pixels, so this time the Raynox beats the extension tubes. That has to do with physics and maths. Again, let me know in the comments when you have a question. Additionally, the extension tubes eat more light, so the much better choice for a macro add-on for a dedicated macro lens for now is the Raynox. And now the fun really starts. Let's add the Raynox 250 and the extension tubes to the macro lens. 1169 pixels. Pretty cool, I would say. Remember, 1:1 with 316, so we are now almost at 4:1. Don't mix that with 1:4. 4:1 would be 4 times life size, 1:4 would be 1/4 life size. Can we beat that? Any bets? We have a few more options. First is a so-called reverse mount. This is by far the cheapest macro option. They start at roughly $8. They come in different sizes. The size you will need depends on the filter thread diameter that is written in your lens cap. You can, however, get a bigger one and adapt it to your lens using one or more so-called step-up rings. A complete set costs roughly $17 and can also be used to adapt, for example, regular filters to any lens size. I bought the 70-70mm reverse mount because I will later use it with another lens and use the step-up rings to adapt it to the kit lens. One very important note regarding regular reverse mounts: as you can see, the contacts of the lens are not connected with anything, so you cannot change the aperture. Remember, I was talking about contacts before when we discussed the extension tubes. So for extension tubes without these contacts, you need to use the same workaround that I will introduce you to now. What you have to do depends on your manufacturer of your camera. For Canon and Sony, you have to switch to live view, at best in video mode, set the aperture you want, let's say f11, and while live view is still active, detach the lens. That will lock in the aperture size. Nikon, on the other hand, has a lever on the back that you have to adjust. Some people use toothpicks, others gaffer tape to adjust it accordingly. What does all the hassle get us? This first rather crappy result. Eye distance 241 pixels. We are a little spoiled by now, so that is rather disappointing. But if we zoom out on the lens and use the 18mm end of the kit lens, we get a totally different image. Remember, we reversed the mount, so a short focal length will kind of become a long focal length. And I'd say this is pretty spectacular, particularly for a tool that only costs a few dollars. Unfortunately, the spider moved a bit, but we cannot blame him, can we? Eye distance, 1268 pixels. Let me show you a secret trick though. If you turn the manual focus ring to make this front tube as long as possible, we get an even bigger magnification, 1429 pixels. Pretty cool. We see, however, that the image is rather soft, even though the focus is spot on, so the resolution of the camera kinda outperforms the resolution of the lens. Anyway, since we're already here, can we get an even bigger magnification? How about adding the extension tubes to the reverse mount? I see you jumping for excitement, just like I did. Look at this. If I zoom in as we did before, it doesn't even fit the screen. So let me zoom out again. Eye distance, center to center as we always did, 2653 pixels. That's more than 8 times life size. Remember, that is uncropped now, so we didn't zoom into the image to measure the eye distance. But you see that the depth of focus is getting really shallow and the softness increased, so maybe it's the rather cheap kit lens that doesn't perform all that well. So we have to do the obvious, we need to choose a different lens. But which one? We saw that a wider lens created a bigger magnification. 18mm gave us a bigger magnification than 55mm. Here I have an 11mm lens. How cool is that? Exactly, that cool! Remember, this is uncropped. 3445 pixel eye distance, almost 11:1. That is insane! The sharpness is a bit better than with the kit lens, but we see that the depth of focus and the sharpness really suffers. Anything we can do? Yes, we can. I shot a series of 35 images, and with every shot I rotated the crank by 1/16 of a full rotation. Then I brought these images into Helicon Focus, a focus stacking app that will find the sharpest parts of every image and combine it into one. That gave me this image that I then brought into Topos Sharpen AI to remove the softness a bit. This was the result. Compare that to the original image. Again, I will link you to the software I used in the description. I even have a discount code for you that will save you some money. Just to remind you, that was the spider and this is our image. But while this image has insane detail and magnification, it's not my preferred shot of the series. I also did a stack of only 4 images with a dedicated 25mm 5:1 macro lens from Laowa on my Sony a7R II and stacked them into this shot. Not quite the same magnification, 1235 pixel eye distance, shot on a bigger sensor, but I just love the shot because of the color, the angle and the detail. Which one do you like best? Here is a quick run through with all the images and the info beside it. Let me know in the comments and stay tuned for more interesting videos. And don't forget to buy these tools from my referral links.